Gauteng's fourth quarter crime stats were detailed today during a briefing by the Provincial Police Commissioner. Gauteng alone accounts for more than a quarter of our country's crime. Of course, we've also just heard the police commissioner, or the police minister rather, he was in Parliament this afternoon, talking about the steps that they're trying to take to crack down on syndicates. Car theft, of course, is a massive problem. But here's a question. How do you know your car was not stolen? Vehicle cloning, that's when a stolen car is presented as legitimate, is becoming more and more sophisticated. Between 3,000 and 5,000 cases reported each year in South Africa. So, how can you be sure? I'm joined now by Hermanus van Linde, CEO of Integrisure Brokers. Thank you so much for joining us. How do car thieves make a stolen car look legitimate?
Thank you for having me, Sally. That is a very complex topic, and it's becoming more and more complex. On this particular topic, I've recently engaged with some people who are at the Interpol level educating people globally about vehicle cloning. And it's just incredible, like with the Bester case, it's just incredible to see what lengths criminals will go to in order to be successful at stealing and thriving. It's just absolutely incredible. So it's becoming more and more complex as time goes on, and it really does take a keen expert eye to identify whether a vehicle's been cloned simply by looking at the VIN number that might have been cloned or replaced on the vehicle. There are many other things that you could use, of course, to try and determine that, but it is very, very difficult and becoming quite complex.
Surely if you're buying your car from a reputable dealer, you're safe.
You should be safe. Most vehicle clone incidents happen private sales, and so that's one of the symptoms that we've identified regarding vehicle cloning, is that it's usually a private sale. And so really it's up to you to do your due diligence and do it properly to try and determine whether there is something here that seems out of place. So it's usually private sales. It's usually not meeting at the seller's home address. It's usually that the vehicle's color's been changed, and there are key indicators that would say to you that usually the vehicle's being sold for below retail value, for example. So there's a saying: if it seems too good to be true, then it likely is too good to be true. And so all these things should raise your awareness about these things, because all these things could be indicators that the vehicle might be cloned.
But surely if you're buying a car, even privately, once you go and register the car and you put the VIN number in, because that's part of the registration process, if I recall correctly, surely at that point, would it show you that there was a problem? Or might you go through that entire registration process and not realize?
Well, you might go through that entire registration process and not realize that the surest way for you to determine whether a vehicle has been cloned is by taking it to a microdot fitment or microdot verification center. So since 2012, there's a law passed that said that all new vehicles need to be sprayed with microdots. A microdot essentially is a tiny particle sprayed onto the vehicle that can't be seen by the naked eye, and that particle contains a unique number. That number can then in turn identify what sort of vehicle it is, what color it is, and some other details about this vehicle, and its VIN number, its original VIN number. So if your vehicle has been cloned, you take it to a microdot center. That microdot center, at a small fee or at a nominal fee, would be able to identify whether this vehicle matches the description of the vehicle. It might be a C-Class Mercedes, but the VIN number might be for a Hilux Bucky, for example. And they can identify that at those microdot centers. There are 10,000 dots on every vehicle. That means it's really hard for criminals to recover all of those dots. Now, they might fit other dots on top of the vehicle over those other dots, but then that will be picked up in the assessment. And that really is the surest way for you to determine whether the vehicle has been cloned or not.
Okay, so all cars manufactured after 2012 have microdots. Well, I learn something new every day.
Yes.
Talk to me.
Incredible.
What kind of trouble is the owner left with if they discover that they bought a stolen vehicle? What is? It seems the onus is on them, isn't it?
Well, that's the sad part, is that as an insurance provider to our clients, we see this a lot where clients are left completely out of pocket. The client, a friend of mine recently, a client of ours, bought a vehicle for 400,000 Rand privately. The vehicle was identified by the police as a stolen vehicle about a year later. He was contacted by the authorities. And unfortunately, he then had to cooperate with them, otherwise he would be implicated in this process. And so he had to cooperate with them, which is what I would advise for you to cooperate with the police. They took the vehicle to an identification, a police investigation unit, and then subsequently determined by looking at the history and the replacement of the VIN numbers and all sorts of evidence, the vehicle had been cloned, and then confiscated the vehicle. Your insurance policy does not cover for that. Insurance policies have a very specific exclusion regarding the confiscation of a vehicle by authorities.
So if you're doing...
And so he's left out of pocket.
That's terrible. I mean, that really is. That's how bad it can be. If you're buying a car privately, should you then say to the owner, listen, can we take this car past a microdot centre just to check it out? Would that be your best advice?
Absolutely. Yes. And if that vehicle is cloned or stolen, that owner of that vehicle will not pitch up at that meeting at the microdot centre. But that would set my mind at ease, at least. Also making sure that in my due diligence, I could identify this person, this individual I was buying from. I could get a home address from him. I could verify that that was a legitimate address, and some other things that you should consider. If it's a cash deal, if it's under retail value, then you've got to ask yourself why. We find that in most cases, when it is under retail value, the reason given is that the owner of the vehicle wants to immigrate. And that's the reason why they want to sell the vehicle quickly. And so it all seems quite legitimate. But if you think about it, there's no reason to sell a vehicle under its value. And so if all those things check out and he's willing to go through a microdot verification center, then that's probably your best bet of identifying if it's a stolen vehicle or not.
Well, thanks for the heads up and the warning, because as you say, they're getting more and more sophisticated at covering their tracks. Thank you very much, Hermanus van der Linde. He's CEO of Integrisure Brokers. Microdots.